and it uses these cards here that I can't take credit for finding. I got them from Outdoor Pursuits, came to my class one time and used these. So what I'm going to talk to you about is how I use these in my class to facilitate concrete conversations with my future teachers, to develop the dispositions to work in a group, and then give feedback to their group, but then also to their future students. So we're going to do this. Yeah, if you'll just give 5 to people. So we use collaborative learning and team-based learning throughout the entire semester. And to get my students out of their comfort zone on the very first day of class, I hand them a card. And if you've received a card, if you would come up here, pretty please, awkward moment that you didn't know you have to stand in front of a crowd. And I give my students, probably the third thing I say to them is get in a circle. And in that circle, on the multi-image side of your card, you have to have a common image with the person to your right and your left. So then I let them flounder around in that uncomfortable zone for a little bit.
What else can we do?
Okay, so while they're talking, eventually they discover that all of the cards have a common image on them. And if I don't discover that, I challenge them to change places and see if they can get in another spot and still be in the correct spot. They're so into this game. So you are all in the right spot, no matter where you are.
Yes. Yes.
This is what happens when you have a slide. So then when they get in that circle and you can hold on, and they're standing there and they realize we all have something in common, we talk about the meaning of Ubuntu, which is I am because we are, and it's a concept not really translatable to English. And then we facilitate a conversation about what common bonds mean and how they're all here in the same class, but for different reasons. So the next thing that I do with them, I'm trying to remember what was on my slides, is we play face-off. So then each person has a card, and you've got a card, and you now have a card. So then I tell them everyone in the room has a card, and they're milling about the room, and they have it, and whatever. And so then if you two would play along, do a little improv. The direction is find the common image on your card. Once you find the common image on your card, you have to find something you have in common with one another. Okay.
And we're cute.
Yeah, on the same team of wellness. What I discover is my students are doing that when they try and find something in common with one another, they end up kind of interviewing each other. It kind of happens in a natural conversation instead of that awkward thing that happens on the first day when you're like, what's your name? What's your major? Tell us something about yourself. So then they have that conversation without it being too forced. Sometimes if I was feeling especially mischievous that first day class, I make them look at the card, kind of memorize it, and then put it on their forehead and walk around the room, and then they have to figure out what that common image is without seeing their card, and then they have to problem solve together. And it also, again, gets them out of their comfort zone. They feel a little silly, so when we move into the academic content, they feel more comfortable dealing with that. Trying to think of the next thing we talked about. Eventually, we get into teams. Those teams are random. They're randomly assigned. They stay in that team throughout the entire semester. In that team, they have to problem solve. They have to do problem-based learning. The most challenging thing for them is giving feedback to one another. The feedback tends to be kind of vague, evaluative. Oh, that was great. So to get them to give good feedback to one another, the last thing I'm going to tell you about in the minute I have left is I spread all the cards out on their table, and I tell them, find an image that represents a strength you bring to the group. So they find that image, and then they share in their group. Find an image that represents a fear or frustration you have in group work, and then they start to get really honest. The great thing about the cards, though, is it takes the focus away from the individuals and towards these images, and they can almost always find an image that represents a fear and frustration they have in group work. The final thing that I ask them, and then it gets very honest, is what is your tell? when you get frustrated in a group, what behaviors do you have? Do you cross your arms? Do you disengage? And then how does your group need to communicate to you to draw you back in? Or maybe they don't need to communicate to you. Maybe you need to do a self-check. So they have that honest conversation and lay some ground rules about how they'll communicate within that group. From there, we transition into real communication. They talk about how they will actually literally communicate in their groups. Are they going to have a group meet? Are they setting up something on D2L? And then they also establish norms for communication in their groups so that they can be honest with one another, give honest feedback on the strategies that they're bringing to their team. And I'm at time, I think.
You are.
Yeah.